This happened over a year ago, but it definitely makes me check my surroundings these days. I live in Southern California. I had my half-sister and her boyfriend visiting, and I took them to a beach about an hour away from where I live. They decided to do the tourist thing, as they live out in the east, and this was his first visit to the west. So I went to the pier and decided to take a walk on the beach, under and near the pier. It was around October, so not cold, but there weren't many tourists, just surfers here and there. I'm 38 years old, male, and I can definitely hold my own, so I wasn't worried about possibly bumping into the occasional unsavory character. I sat down in the sand and watched the waves roll in. I was in my own little world, until I felt someone wrap their arms around me. I thought it was my sister, until I smelt the stench of alcohol and urine. I go to throw this person off me, and I noticed whoever it was wearing false purple nails. "Ma'am, get off me!" I shouted, peeling the woman's arms off me. That's when a deep baritone voice whispers,
"Don't fight it, baby."
Nope, not happening. Fight or flight clicked in, and so did my military training. I managed to get them off me and see a 6'3" guy wearing fishnet stockings, a skirt, faux fur, and a bright red wig. He started laughing this creepy deep laugh. He reeked of alcohol and was obviously homeless. I took off hoping to see a beach patrol officer, but the sun was starting to set and there weren't many people out. I took off to find my sister and her boyfriend and found them in a gift shop. I ran into a police officer and told him about the guy. Supposedly he's a very well-known man at that beach and they knew exactly who he was. So cross-dressing homeless guy, let's not meet.
My friend's uncle had a sugar shack where he boiled maple sap to make maple syrup. And above the open vat of boiling liquid were rafters. The guy's young daughter climbed up into the rafters and was playing up there. That's when she fell right into the boiling sugar solution. The vat was enormous, so she went right under and came up screaming, flesh blistering off of her. The guy then took the big oar-like implement he used to stir the boiling syrup and pushed her back down under the water, killing his own child, because he knew if he tried to rescue her, she'd be pretty much 100% burnt and would die an even more gruesome death. I was super excited to get my first apartment. It was in an old antebellum house that was split into 4 units. Very cool place to live. However, every time I was taking a shower, I would get this overwhelmingly creepy feeling, like somebody was watching me. Then the dreams started. I kept dreaming about this old lady in a pink nightgown. Sometimes she just looked frail and sweet, and she'd say that I should go with her. She'd never say where we'd go. Other times, the dreams were terrifying. Her eye sockets were empty. Her hair was greasy, stringy, and falling out. Her mouth was twisted in a tormented scream. She'd frantically claw at the air, trying to grab me. The longer I lived there, the more menacing the dreams got. The feeling of unease and the feeling of being watched in the shower increased dramatically. By the time we moved out, I could not close my eyes in the shower at all. It sounds silly, but I had this overwhelming feeling that I was going to die or lose my soul if I had closed my eyes too long. After moving out, I discussed all these weird feelings with a friend of mine who had recently moved into a house across the street from my old apartment. I was trying to laugh it off. He said that another friend of his used to live in the apartment above mine several years ago, and an old lady died in what used to be my apartment. Nobody else wanted to live in that unit for more than a couple of months at a time. The building recently burned down, and the fire started in my old apartment. They still don't know what started the fire. This is my grandmother's story. It was 1933, and she was 13, living in the middle of Manchester, England. One night, she got out of bed to go to the bathroom, and as she wandered through, passing the staircase, she saw her aunt standing at the top, looking out the window. Curious, she trotted up the stairs and stood next to her to see what she was looking at, but only saw the back garden and the alleyway out the back. She turned to ask her aunt what she was looking at, only to see a nebulous, faceless figure staring back down at her. The figure then reached out her hands and gripped my young grandmother's face. The next thing my grandmother remembers is her older brother, who was about 27, running down the hall toward them, picking her up and carrying her into the nearest room. She spent the next week in and out of consciousness, eventually recovering, but now without a sense of smell. Her family insisted it was all a hallucination caused by a severe case of influenza, which is probably true. But my grandmother said she never felt safe in that house again. She moved to New Zealand about 10 years later, and only ever returned to England and that house once before she died. My grandparents lived on a farm in the middle of Nebraska. They had just gotten married, moved in together, and had their first baby. The baby was only a few months old and needed to be watched. But it was early morning, and the cows had to be milked. My grandfather could not have done all the work alone. He needed my grandmother to help. The labor was easy, and only took a short while to be finished. The baby had been fed and was soundly sleeping. So my grandfather and grandmother both went to the barn to milk the cows, leaving my aunt asleep in the house. They finished milking the cows, and my grandmother headed back to the house while my grandfather stayed in the barn to finish some work. When she approached the house, my grandmother noticed the door was ajar and swinging gently in the wind. She figured it was probably nothing, but was nervous just the same. She called for my grandfather, who reluctantly came to soothe her nerves. They entered the house together and heard the sound of the toilet flushing. Strange, yes, but farmhouses in this area at the time had rather shoddy plumbing, so they remained calm. They then picked up their paces and headed toward the cradle, where my aunt had begun screaming. The light, hanging down from the ceiling, was swinging violently, as if it was just thrown on. My grandmother goes to pick up my aunt, noticing a black hair on her white gown. Both of my grandparents had white blonde hair, and there was no one around who could own this hair. My grandmother became hysterical when my grandfather noticed the latch to the attic was swinging, as though someone had just crawled up inside of it. He went toward it, readying himself to open it. Just then, my grandmother lunged at him and convinced him in between her sobs to leave instantly, jump in the truck, and drive to town. Reluctantly, he agreed. They never found out if anyone was in the house or not. However, a week later, Charlie Starkweather was found less than 30 miles away from their home. He was, I believe, the largest serial killer in America for a short time when these events transpired. Several months ago, my cat went missing in the woods, and I had to go look for him. It was late at night, and the moon was a thin crescent, so the only source of light was my flashlight. I had seen my cat several times, but he seemed to be scared of something. Every time I got close, he'd run further away. At a certain point, he got scared of something and ran back toward the house. I started to make my way back and saw a man. He was just standing there, absolutely still. He had nondescript brown hair and a tweed jacket on. I could make out all of his facial features, except his eyes, where there just seemed to be a shadow. I called out to him, but he didn't respond. I then said, "I can see you, you know," and was greeted with silence. I turned and walked a few steps, turned around. He was a few feet closer. I turned, walked some more, and looked again. This time, he was partially hidden behind a tree. I didn't need any more warning. I booked it back to my house, where my cat desperately wanted to come in. I locked the doors and sat on my couch until I calmed down. Ever since that night, every few weeks, I hear a noise at my window. A slow, loud, rhythmic tap. There are no trees out there, and most of the nights, it happened when there's no wind. Every time I've been too scared to look, probably for the better. The last thing I want to see is a man with a tweed jacket and no eyes.
I started watching true scary stories a few years ago. I found myself binge watching like crazy. I'm talking my entire day off, from 10 a.m. until I went to bed. I started getting attached to some of the narrators, and I started following them on social media like Snapchat or Instagram. Not long after, I decided I wanted to be a narrator myself. I bought a decent microphone and used the software on my computer to create vocal tracks and edit. I worked hard on my videos, and I reached out to as many narrators as I could. Most of them ignored, but some didn't. A few offered collaborations. After collaborating with bigger channels, mine started getting more views and subscribers. I remember waking up one morning to see I had 500 subscribers more than I did when I had last checked. It was exciting. I started getting noticed by larger channels and ended up getting quite personal with some of them, especially this one specific channel. A big channel. A well-liked, charismatic narrator with an amazing voice. I started speaking to him on a regular basis. Not long after our first or maybe second conversation, I discovered we were only about an hour away from each other. As soon as we made that discovery, I knew I was thinking the same thing he was. I never asked to collaborate with him because I wanted to show him I wasn't sweet-talking him just to get on his channel, which would have doubled my subscribers. To be honest, I had a funny feeling about him. Our conversations were innocent and sweet for the most part, but when I FaceTimed him, there was a look in his eyes that I can't describe. His actual eyes were a little bit blurry due to the connection, but I could tell he was scanning the room behind me. I just tucked that in my back pocket with the rest of the little orange flags I had collected. One night I was sitting in my living room. I had the urge to cover every single little spot on the windows that could possibly be looked through, because I had the worst dreadful feeling I've ever had in my life. I hadn't heard from him since the night before. We didn't exactly end the conversation on good terms, but at this point, I wasn't even connecting him to this feeling. I noticed a corner of the window that wasn't covered by anything. I walked over to it, but I noticed it looked like it had either smudged or had a sticker on it. I started trying to rub whatever it was off, but it stayed. Then it moved. It was a fucking eye. I made the strangest sound I've ever made. I guess my breathing pattern was a little off from my reaction of panic. I remember feeling a little embarrassed about the sound. The eye disappeared, and I turned my lamp off. I quickly hopped on my couch to look out the corner of the window, and I saw a man. He was running, but hopping like he was excited, like an NBA player running to the other side of the court after he had just hit a three-pointer. He was wearing dark clothes, but logos were indeed visible. I didn't call the police. I thought maybe he had buddies up the road that dared him to do something, and he was excited to have actually gotten a scream out of me. That would explain the celebratory run. That thought comforted me. Yeah, they must have seen me closing all my blinds like a crazy person. Almost a week goes by, and I'm posting content, my fellow narrators are posting content, and I have yet to hear from him. I sent the last message, so I figured I'd leave it up to him to send the next. He sounded good in his 2 videos that had been posted during our speaking hiatus. I'll admit, I missed talking to him a bit. He was, after all, intelligent. I had a few glasses of wine that same night. I was feeling a little frisky, kind of embarrassing to admit, and another reason why this is written on a throwaway. I was pretty horny and having some serious fantasies about this narrator. I decided to get pretty and FaceTime him again. He didn't answer. He texted instead. "What's up?" I responded with, "You tell me," with some kissy emoji or something stupid. "Give me 5 minutes," he says. I waited impatiently with a rolling sensation going through my stomach until my FaceTime ring filled my ears and the room. I waited a few seconds to answer, then I did. He was smiling and looking directly at me. Not scanning the room this time, just looking at me. We started having a little fun when, in the worst possible time, FaceTime froze. I kept waiting and ended up losing it. I had gotten myself going and then poof, Apple certainly knows how to dry out a well. So I'm just staring at the frozen screen where he wasn't even visible. It must have froze when he was adjusting himself or maybe trying to fix the connection. After about 30 seconds, I noticed something I had seen before, but not there. I noticed this specific logo on a sweatshirt draped over the ottoman in front of his bed. I could also make out dark joggers that matched. The connection blacked out. I could no longer see an image. I was frozen in my warm house. I couldn't move. I felt true terror. This guy is stalking me. The only thing that comforted me was I knew I was safe in that moment. He couldn't come here in any less than an hour. I had an hour to make sure my house was secure. I honestly couldn't push myself to call the police. I had no proof. I hadn't reported the night before like I should have. I also was afraid that he would get all of his subscribers after me. Being cyberbullied is terrifying. All those people coming at you with pitchforks. I knew that if I accused him of anything, he would win anyway. I just want you to know, I'm not stupid. I know it was you. You effortlessly pushed me out of the community right when I was starting to show success. I know you're reading this, and hell, I bet you'll narrate it just for shits. I don't care what you do. Just don't show up at my home ever again. I have so many questions for you, but I'm happy to leave them unanswered. Hey guys, if you guys were wondering, there's no link in the description to that first story because it was deleted shortly after it was posted on Reddit on Let's Not Meet. That's been happening to me a lot lately. I'll go to use a story and it's gone. So I can't credit it and I don't have it anymore usually, so I've been copying it and pasting it to my notepad. I'm glad I did it with that one because that one was really interesting. I enjoyed that one. But I also want to let you know I'm doing this thing. I'm starting to, if you have an idea or a suggestion for a theme or a video, let me know, and if I end up using it, I'll give you a shout out, whatever. It's kind of like a subscriber's choice, but like more personal. So if you have any ideas, let me know. The first one is actually going to be school lockdown stories, and Christian Cofield suggested that to me on Snapchat. It's a really cool dude. Thank you, Christian. But that's about it. Yeah, follow me on Twitter, add me on Snapchat, follow me on Instagram. Peace. Oh, I turned in my packet and I got called in for, I'm taking the exam Saturday. A couple days I get to take the exam. If I pass the exam, I take the agility test and I'm good with that. I know I'll be all set. So soon I'll be starting Police Academy. Pew, pew, pew.